Do you want an amazing marriage? Are you ready to take your marriage to the next level? Then stick around for Your Marriage Matters podcast with marriage coach Lynn. Let's put some fun and sizzle into your relationship.
Today, we're going to talk about a form of communication that might prove to be a lifesaver for you. I say lifesaver because many couples will say that communication is their biggest obstacle. I discovered the concept and process of nonviolent communication 10 years ago through a friend, and I've incorporated it into my marriage and dealings with others. I wouldn't say I use it all the time, but I use it enough, and I catch myself when I'm headed down the wrong path. Nonviolent communication takes effort and practice because it feels odd at first. Today, I'll talk about what it is and the basics. I encourage you to visit the website and read a few books by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, the psychologist who created nonviolent communication. The website is cnvc.org. That stands for Center for Nonviolent Communication. There are practitioners all over the country, so maybe you'd like to get more deeply involved with this process. Marshall Rosenberg has many YouTube videos that explain the process too. The objective of nonviolent communication is to create a quality of connection in that everybody's needs will get met through natural giving. Think about that. When we communicate, we are trying to connect. The highest form of communication is when everyone leaves the exchange feeling that their needs were met, that they matter, that they were not coerced or ridiculed or yelled at. There's almost always a sense of empowerment and positivity because the communication took place respectfully, honestly, and with each person in mind. Dr. Rosenberg has been instrumental in mediating the most difficult impasses between organizations and, in some cases, governments or countries. He has many insightful things to say and firmly believes that we would have no war if we agreed to make connections among people in order that everyone had their needs met in a process of natural giving. He says that in Western culture, there are destructive habits that do not take into consideration a natural giving process. This especially happens in situations where you have a superior and a subordinate. For example, a parent might tell a child to go clean his room, or demand that the child offer an apology to someone. When we dominate over another person, yell, or demand that they do something, we are not practicing nonviolent communication. Let's say a child's room is messy. Nonviolent communication would look something like this. The parent would say, "I noticed you have several items of dirty clothing and trash littered on your floor and an unmade bed. I feel like a cleaner environment would be beneficial and would like to see a clean room. Do you think we can clean it up today?" Some of you might say, "Wow, that's too many words. A parent has a right to tell a child to go pick up his room." The thing about telling someone what to do is that they might not want to do it and might not internalize it as important. When they hear you citing specifics and sharing your feelings, needs, and requests, they might feel more obliged to clean the room with a positive attitude. Over time, we are looking for both parties to experience a natural giving. When you tell someone, they begrudgingly do tasks, usually with a negative attitude. I think nonviolent communication contributes to respect, love, peace, and calm in the home. Who doesn't want peace and calm in the home? Nonviolent communication is a connection, not a compromise. Think of it as a conflict resolution to everyone's satisfaction. You are translating proposed solutions or strategies to positive action language. People often communicate by criticizing, insulting, creating distance among people. In your communication dialogues, keep in mind the needs of everyone involved. People neglect to consider the needs of everyone. We are mainly considered with our own needs. We all have the need for air, water, rest, and food. Our psychological needs are understanding, support, honesty, and meaning. We want to be loved, and I hope we want to give love. In nonviolent communication, you're going to consider the needs of the other person. You're going to understand the needs of the other person as well as asking, what are your needs in the message you are trying to convey? In my example earlier about getting a child to clean their room, yes, it's the parent's need to have a clean home, but it's also a need to ensure the child is learning responsibility and contribution to the household so that the child will mature into someone who knows the value of a clean room and home. When you tell people to do things, you take away the opportunity for them to internalize and take ownership. Nonviolent communication, we want to live passionately and be fully alive. We want honesty, integrity, and we don't want to globalize or categorize. Globalizing language sounds like, you always do that, or you're always late, or you never understand me. When we categorize, we are breaking situations down into one way or the other. When we group together, we miss the individual's uniqueness, unique motivations, needs, and personality. Violent communication involves language of domination, language of judging what people are. It's looking to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. Seeing things in black and white. We don't want that. What we need in nonviolent communication is empathy, being present. Often our minds are on our own issues and we are not being present. There is no diagnosis, advice, or judging. We have no need to get angry, hurt, or frightened. Let's talk about needs. Sometimes we feel desperate if our needs aren't met. Sometimes people are elusive and they don't want to give you too much information so that they can keep control. Sometimes people might not be interested in you, so they act accordingly. They don't introduce you. They don't respond or reply to your attempts at calling, texting, or emailing. You're not important enough. They share sparingly. A lot of people will build up and reveal little bits of information at a time to draw attention to themselves or their cause as a teaser. Let's ask, why are people selfish? They might be insecure or have fear. Why are people arrogant? They might not feel good enough, or they might feel better than you. They might have something to prove. In nonviolent communication, we aren't trying to prove anything. We're trying to make a connection. I want to take a few minutes to discuss the notion of rewards and punishment, something most parents do while raising children, and what often happens in a school dynamic. When we use rewards and punishments, we are exerting power over others. Nonviolent communication, or NVC, is based on power with people, not a form of control over others by having influence which can make people suffer if they don't do what we want them to do. Reward and punishment can be manipulative or treating people like puppets. Instead, NVC is based on mutual trust and respect, which makes people open to hearing one another and giving to one another out of a desire to contribute to one another's well-being, rather than out of fear or punishment or hope for a reward. Are you catching this? It's really a lovely way to communicate, and it's different for many people who are used to that old cultural traditional model. We want to communicate feelings and needs without criticism, without demands or threats. Here's a quote from Gandhi. Quote, "Don't mix up that which is habitual with that which is natural." End quote. Some people think NVC is permissive or passive, but it's about two parties trusting each other and not forcing authority over one another. It's a different quality of direction as opposed to forcing authority onto a child. What about request or demand? When people hear demands, it looks to them as though our caring and respect and love are conditional. It looks as though we are only going to care for them as people when they do what we want. Dr. Rosenberg has good information about those who struggle with anger. I highly recommend checking his books out. One point I want to make about anger is that if and when you are directly connected to your needs, you won't get angry. It's interesting that if you practice nonviolent communication, you come to understand yourself better and your needs and can then adopt healthy ways of communicating. In a nutshell, you determine what feelings are behind your anger, such as feeling hurt, sad, scared, or frustrated. And what I want to say about this process is that sometimes one spouse will learn the process and then you slowly help implement it and practice it and teach your spouse to use it. And you begin to see things differently as you adopt these new communication techniques, and you will be pleasantly surprised as to the fact that you will understand your partner better. You will understand and have more compassion for the angry moments or the criticisms that might come out, or the times when you bring something up and then your partner might say, well, hey, but you are doing this. And so you will begin to notice details, and it's wonderful. Another point I want to make about nonviolent communication is that people want an empathetic connection before they want advice. They want empathy. A lot of people like to dole out advice, again, especially in a superior-subordinate relationship. Let's spend a little time going through the process of nonviolent communication. It's easier if you see the process in writing, so please refer to books by Marshall Rosenberg or the website cnvc.org. I have some basics on my website, marriagecoachlynn.com, but you might like to go directly to the sources. As I said, we want to form a connection. The first question to consider is, what's alive in us? What's alive in you? Observe feelings and the needs connected to those feelings. The next question, what can we do to make life wonderful? For me, for you. Think about forming an empathic connection. You want to understand the heart and see the beauty in the other person. The goal is to try to be present with the other person. Don't you love being in the presence of those who are aware and insightful enough to make this kind of connection with you? As you begin your journey of nonviolent communication, you might find that not many people are operating at this level. It's like a whole new language to learn. When it comes time for you to make a request, use positive action language. Create a judicial correctional system rather than a punishing system. Right? We want to make positive corrections as we go. We don't want to punish and blame. Parents are good at creating punishing systems. It seems easier and more expedient, but in the long run, it's not a good way to relate to people and does not reap the relationship benefits you'd like to have. Ask yourself these questions. What do you want the other person to do? What do we want their reasons to be for doing what we want them to do? Think of my clean your room example. You don't want a child to go through the motions and obey your commands. You want the child to internalize the concept of having a clean room for the sake of having a clean room, to learn values, to learn to automatically see the goodness in a clean room, and someday you won't have to even have a conversation about a clean room because the child will adopt the value of keeping the room clean. Now, you may not believe this, but go ahead and try it. I challenge you. The important thing is when that child grows up into be an adult, we hope that they will adopt good behaviors of a clean room and a healthy home. More on the request versus demand. When people do things we ask them to do out of guilt, shame, duty, obligation, fear, or punishment, we will pay for it with that energy. How many of you grew up with parents who did not practice nonviolent communication? where they told you to do something, where you were almost like a robot having to go through the motions and obey the parents' commands. I bet you obeyed if you had to, and then when you had a moment of freedom, you did the opposite behind their back. Kids have to see your need as a choice. Let's talk about the 4 steps of nonviolent communication. They are observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And again, this is posted on my website. You can find this in Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's writings. Step 1, observations. This is a description of what is seen or heard without added interpretations. For example, instead of saying, "She's having a temper tantrum," you would describe your observations and say, "She's lying on the floor crying and kicking." Do you notice the difference there? When you describe what you observe, you are sticking to the facts. You're not making some broad brush generalization, interpretation, perception. You're describing. She's lying on the floor crying and kicking. So that's observation. The next step 2, feelings. Use I statements. If you say you are tossing blame and making accusations. So you want to share your feelings. "I'm worried that you've been coming home at 1 a.m. on a school night. I'm afraid that it will impact your ability to do well in school." Step 3, needs. State your need rather than the other person's action as the cause. For example, "I feel annoyed because I need support in the house," rather than saying, "I feel annoyed because you don't do the dishes." "I feel annoyed at the heavy housework load I take on every day." That's better. You see the differences? You're just telling your feelings. So we've stated our observations, we share our feelings, and we're giving our needs to the other person. So then when we get to step 4 with requests, hopefully you're married to a person with empathy that cares about your needs. So now and that they're listening to you. Now you're ready to make your request. Make sure that your requests are doable, immediate, and stated in positive action language. That doesn't mean directive, assertive, and clear. I'm talking about positive action language, what you want instead of what you don't want. When we make a request, we invite the other person to say no. So therefore, we are not manipulating. There's a lot of choice. Natural giving and natural communication involves freedom of choice, not demanding or manipulating. So here's an example. "Would you be willing to come back tonight at 8 p.m.? This is much more productive than saying, "Would you make sure not to be late again?" Right? You see the difference in tone and the difference in the way the words are worded. So again, observations, feelings, needs, requests. Begin trying to implement nonviolent communication. Let me know if you find it helpful. I find that it creates a better give and take when communicating, and it's very respectful. It might feel awkward at first to begin to employ nonviolent communication. You'll find it takes a lot more time than you're used to, but give it a try. After a while, it'll become natural to you. Nonviolent communication is something that can help you make your marriage great.